Is AI out to take your Azure job? I know it's on top of mind for a lot of people with generative AI these days. There is a lot of people thinking that AI will put them out of a job, but they are willing to sacrifice the notion of that for the idea that AI can also help them save time and do their job better. And that's the case with Copilot for Azure. It's not there to take your job. It is a very powerful generative AI tool that's there to help you elevate your job. So in this video, we're going to cover what is Copilot for Azure, exactly what can it do, and how can it help you elevate your work in Azure. Microsoft Copilot for Azure is an AI assistant of sorts that's built directly into the Azure portal, and it leverages large language model, LLMs, for generative AI, and is tied directly into the Azure control plane, as well as has context of what's going on in your Microsoft tenant, its settings and configurations and resources, and it uses all of that to be able to help you do some pretty neat things within Azure. Say you wanted to create something as a web farm. Maybe it's a web server front end that's load balanced and you have a SQL Server back end. You can ask Copilot for the steps necessary to deploy all of that, including scripts for that deployment and the resources that you need to provision. Or say maybe you want to deploy a web application that is serverless on the back end. So it's all using Azure Web Apps. And maybe that's something you've never done before. But lo and behold, you have access to Copilot for Azure to be able to walk you through the process and exactly how to set it up correctly with the context of your tenant in mind. You can also use Copilot for Azure with helping you understand the costs that are going on inside your Microsoft Azure tenant. There's a myriad of costs that can often get out of hand, whether it's on the storage side or it's on the virtual machine side. You have things scaling. Copilot for Azure can help you understand that in a more natural way. Because if you've ever seen a Azure cost breakdown in a spreadsheet format, it's a mess. There's a lot of items in there. You're not exactly sure what you're looking at. Yeah, there's the cost analyzer built into there and that billing side, so you can kind of get a breakdown inside the Azure portal. But Copilot for Azure helps take it a step further to really understand where your spend is and be able to have a natural conversation about it to understand it more. Like, hey, what was the highest spend that I had in the last 30 days? Of that spend, what was maybe the highest virtual machine, or what is the virtual machine that has the highest resource utilization? Different questions that you can ask and interact with Copilot AI in order to get down to the bottom of what you really need to know about your spend and your resources inside the environment. Also, use Copilot for Azure for things like scripting. You can use Copilot for Azure to produce Azure CLI scripts or Azure PowerShell scripts. And if you're like me, you're maybe proficient in actually scripting, but you still have to go out and look up all those commandlets that you need for those scripts. And so you're Googling, trying to figure out exactly what this commandlet that does this one specific thing. And then you're having to plug in information from your Microsoft tenant into that script from there. Well, with Copilot for Azure, you can ask it to help you produce a script directly within the Azure tenant. It's aware of the context of the environment. It is very aware of all the commandlets, whether it's Azure CLI or Azure PowerShell, that it needs to produce to be able to obtain certain functionalities. And so it can help you produce the script that you're looking for and even break it down in steps. It'll let you know what variables need to be replaced inside the script to make it functional for what you need it to do. You can even use Copilot for Azure to analyze an existing script or code that's inside the Azure portal. Ask it questions and say, what does this part that I'm highlighting do? Help me understand exactly what I'm looking at here. So Copilot provides you a myriad of different ways to enhance your job day in and day out inside Azure. You can ask it general questions too about your resources, such as maybe what were all the updates applied to my Linux virtual machines? Or maybe you want it to produce a query to find all the changes in your environment over the last 7 days. Or maybe you want to list a storage account that were accessible from the internet because of some security concerns. So really, Copilot is there to help you in your day to day Azure job, and it can work with all these resources and information to help enhance your effectiveness inside Azure. It's not taking your job, it's not quite there yet. It very much requires a user operator to achieve what it needs to do, but it can help you save some time in various steps. And that's the power of AI in our work today, is helping us get 80% of the way there, and it's up to us to figure out the last 20%. That's the time savings that we get. As with any artificial intelligence, whether it's Copilot for Azure, whether it's Copilot for Microsoft 365, whether it is ChatGPT, any AI generative chat, always make sure you're paying attention to the content it produces. Because even though it has all the context of your tenant, even though it has all of this tie in, sometimes when you're asking it questions that's a little bit beyond its purview, it's going to give you answers that sound correct, but may not be correct. For the most part, I found that you can trust Copilot for Azure when it comes to tasks that are regular about Azure for day to day work, stuff that you're trying to achieve. And it's pretty good about telling you about things that it can't do, especially while it's still in its preview phase. Definitely encourage you to try the Copilot for Azure preview and try out some of the things that we discussed here today and see how generative AI within Azure can help you in your day to day work.